When you run the ball, are you gonna huck and buck when you get it?
No, sir.
No, you gonna run.
Wow, some action, huh? Preseason college football training. It's been a long time since I had the pads on at the University of Colorado, and I'll tell you the truth, my body doesn't miss it a bit. I'm Tom Brookshier, and my home at a football game is up there now in the press box. And we're going to show you a different side of college football for the next hour. We're going to be joined for that press box with 6 college football writers. From down here on the field, 6 head football coaches. From Boston College, Jack Bicknell, Bo Schembechler of Michigan, Pat Dye of Auburn, Fred Akers of Texas, Tom Osborne of Nebraska, and Terry Donahue of UCLA. The idea is to get the opinions and predictions of the coaches and writers across America on the top teams, the possible Heisman Trophy candidates, perhaps the selection of a national championship team, and a look at 2 rules that are extremely controversial. So join me now for a fascinating look at the coaches, teams, and changing times on College Pigskin Preview 1984. In the past few months, there have been major coaching changes in college football. Lou Holtz, Kenny Hatfield, Bill Mallory, and one involving the leader of the national champion University of Miami team. Howard Schnellenberger waved bye-bye to the Hurricanes for a multi-million-dollar job in pro football. He was replaced by Jimmy Johnson from Oklahoma State. Across the country, debate continued on the question of a national playoff, and television rights to college games were turned into a state of confusion. To help us analyze these changing trends in college football, we'll be joined by 6 experts who spend their Saturdays right here in the press box, each representing a different region of the country, and each a member of the Football Writers Association of America.
I'm Bob Pilley of the Chicago Sun-Times, and I'll be rating the teams of the Big Ten and the Midwest.
I'm Bob Henson of the Topeka Capital Journal, and I'll be covering the Big 8.
I'm Herschel Nissenson of the Associated Press, and I have the East and the Atlantic Coast Conference.
I'm Bill Lumpkin, sports editor of the Birmingham Post-Herald. My area is the Southeastern Conference and the Southern Independence.
I'm Dave Campbell of the Waco Tribune-Herald, and I'll be analyzing the Southwest Conference.
I'm Jim Perry of the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner. I'll be looking at the Pac-10 and WAC conferences.
So, armed with the opinions of men who cover college football virtually every day of their lives, our Pigskin Preview begins with a conference that I used to call the Big Two, but as Bob Pilley of the Chicago Sun-Times tells us, is now one of the most competitive in all of college football.
The first stop on our coast-to-coast preview is the Midwest. The Big Ten, as much as any conference in America, epitomizes the changing power structure in college football these days. For 13 straight years, it was either Michigan or Ohio State marching relentlessly on the Rose Bowl. But in 2 of the last 3 years, Illinois and Iowa have been to Pasadena. Will this parity continue? The man to ask is the winningest active Division 1A coach in the country, Bo Schembechler of Michigan. Bo, as the elder statesman among Big Ten coaches, what do you expect from the conference this fall?
Bob, I think there'll probably be the same 4 teams we had last year, with improvement at Wisconsin and Michigan State. I would say those 6 teams will be a very strong factor, maybe not in terms of winning the title, but they're going to knock off some of the contenders. Iowa, Ohio State, Illinois, and Michigan should be in the race again as they were a year ago.
How do you figure Ohio State with perhaps some uncertainty at quarterback with Mike Tomczak fracturing his leg at the end of spring practice?
I felt that Tomczak at the latter part of last season was really coming on as a quarterback, and in our game was just truly outstanding. And so that's really a shame. There's no question that that's got to be a factor. Now, whether he can play or not, or even if they do play him, I'm not sure that he would be as effective as he normally would have been. But overall, if you look at Ohio State talent-wise, I think they're an extremely talented offensive team. I think they've got the big offensive line. They have the best running back in the league in Byers. They'll have to, of course, replace their receivers. and the defense, particularly at linebacker, would be the key.
How good is Iowa?
I think Iowa probably has the edge over everyone else in defense. And that's the key. They've got most of their people back on defense, and that was a good defensive football team a year ago. And then, of course, having Long, the quarterback, back another year is a plus on offense. But I would say that Iowa may have the best opportunity with Tom Zach hurt and the fact that they have the most returning veterans defensively.
Defending Big Ten champion Illinois will ride the pinpoint passing of junior quarterback Jack Trudeau in search of its second title in 21 years. The Fighting Illini offense will be stronger than last year, but their defense is totally untested, and that could prove to be their downfall. Wisconsin is primed to break into the elite. Their offensive line is solid, and in senior Al Toon, they have a massive, hard-running target who is simply the best pass receiver in the Big Ten. Michigan State, another dark horse, will overrun some contenders with a powerful ground attack and a vastly improving defense. At Northwestern, a move into contention depends on how well junior quarterback Sandy Schwab regains his record-setting form of 2 years ago. New coaches at Minnesota and Indiana need at least a season to establish their programs. For the first time in 3 years, the Wolverines of Michigan will be searching for a quarterback, as starters Steve Smith and 2 All-American offensive linemen have now graduated. But the Michigan offense, which led the Big Ten in rushing a year ago, didn't seem to concern Bo Schembechler after spring practice as much as his pride and joy, the Michigan defense.
If there was one thing that sort of disappointed me a little bit this spring, our defense had the most returning people, and yet I felt our offense held the better during the spring. I like to come out of spring with the defense dominating and the offense looking bad. The reason is that then you know you got a defense, and when you have a defense, you've got a great chance to win the league, because invariably the best defensive team will win the conference championship.
And now for Big Ten predictions. I like Iowa because of Chuck Long at quarterback and an experienced defense returned from a team that won 9 games last year. Second place is a toss-up between Michigan and Ohio State, depending on how their quarterbacks work out. Illinois has a fine offense with quarterback Jack Trudeau, but the Illini won it last year on defense, and Mike White has to replace all of his down linemen and some of his linebackers. Dave McLean thinks Wisconsin can challenge with the best team he has had there.
In the Midwest, Bob Pilley picked an offensive and defensive player of the year. The offensive player of the year, Iowa quarterback Chuck Long. As defensive player of the year, Iowa linebacker Larry Station. Notre Dame is the major Midwestern independent, and Coach Jerry Faust is optimistic with a squad that he has totally recruited. 10 of 11 starters return on an offense that will feature the legs of junior Alan Pinkett, en route to becoming the greatest runner in Notre Dame history. Sophomore quarterback Steve Berline emerged from spring practice as the most improved player on the team. In my opinion, 2 teams facing the most pressure in the Midwest are Notre Dame and Ohio State. In 3 years under Jerry Faust, the Irish are 17 wins, 15 losses. And that's not good enough at South Bend. The Buckeyes haven't been to the Rose Bowl in 4 years, all post-Woody Hayes years. Believe me, there is strong pressure for both teams to recapture their championship tradition. The University of Nebraska has a pressure of a different kind. They've got to replace 3 first-team All-Americans. Next, Bob Henson of the Topeka Capital-Journal is our host for the Big 8.
Going for 2. Gill takes, looks, rolls, throws. Deflected away! Deflected away! Miami leads 31-30. They tried for 2 and didn't make it.
If it hadn't been for that one play in last year's Orange Bowl game, the Big 8 Conference might well have had its first national championship team since Oklahoma in 1975. There are several teams with a chance to win the Big 8 in 1984, but all of those teams have a major question mark. How well those questions are answered will determine the 1984 Big 8 championship.
The big question at Oklahoma State is new coach Pat Jones, the former defensive coordinator. 15 starters returned from last year's Bluebonnet Bowl champions, including all-conference back Sean Jones and quarterback Rusty Hilger, giving the Cowboys enough material to perhaps win it all. A quality tailback could be the missing piece to the Missouri puzzle, but the Tigers must play their key games all on the road. At Nebraska, at Oklahoma State. Easily the Big 8's most unforgiving schedule. Finding a quarterback who can get the ball to all Big 8 receiver Tracy Henderson is a major concern at Iowa State, as is replacing the entire offensive line. At Kansas State, all but 2 starters return to a wide-open offense. That's going to scare a lot of teams. All Big 8 linebacker Willie Pless is Kansas' #1 enforcer. That's the good news. The bad news is the entire offense has to be rebuilt. Colorado surrendered 169 points to Missouri, Nebraska, and Oklahoma a year ago, and they must restructure an overly charitable defense. Oklahoma returns to the wishbone with sophomores Spencer Tillman and Earl Johnson, twin tornadoes, thundering across the plains. The rush and crush offense at Oklahoma will score a lot of touchdowns, but the question is on defense, where all Big 8 Kevin Murphy is the only returning headliner. The situation is a little different at Nebraska, where some highly honored and extremely successful seniors have all gone.
For the last 2 football seasons, Tom Osborne's Nebraska Cornhuskers have come within 1 game of winning the national championship. Tom, what's the outlook for having that type of team in 1984?
Well, we expect to have another good team, Bob. Last year we were a great offensive team, and I think we became a very average defensive team by the end of the year. We had some injuries. We kind of went downhill for one reason or another. And I guess the thing this year is that we feel we'll be improved on defense. The question is how much, and we obviously are not going to have the same talent on offense, and the big question there is just how much we're going to drop off. At quarterback, Craig Sundberg will be the starter. We had a young man who was a walk-on player from Scottsbluff, Nebraska, named Travis Turner, who had a very good spring. Travis will play also. Wingback will be Shane Swanson, replacing Irving Fryer. Shane played a lot and has started a few games when Irving was hurt. Shane will be a senior. Rozier will be replaced by Jeff Smith, I-back out of Wichita, Kansas, who played very well for us the last couple of years and has some experience. So it's not like we have just total inexperience at those spots. Most of those guys have played a lot of football, and I think will be adequate replacements.
For years in Big 8 conference football, it's been Nebraska and Oklahoma, or Oklahoma and Nebraska. A lot of people think this is the year for Oklahoma State or Missouri to break through. I'm not one of those. I'm going to stick with Tom Osborne's Nebraska Cornhuskers to win the 1984 championship, make Oklahoma second, Oklahoma State with a new coach, Pat Jones, third, and Missouri fourth. For my Player of the Year picks, I'll go defensively with Oklahoma end Kevin Murphy, a senior and a returning all-conference player. Offensively, how about Jeff Smith, Nebraska's I-back? He looms as the successor to Mike Rozier and the latest in a long series of great Nebraska tailbacks.
In my opinion, this is a very critical year for Barry Switzer. Oklahoma has whipped arch rival Texas only once in 5 years. They haven't beaten Nebraska in 3 years, and they've lost 12 games over those 3 seasons. That's the kind of record that is unacceptable at Norman, Oklahoma. Next, we'll visit the East with 3 Heisman candidates, a coach who thinks he's Willie Nelson, and our guest expert, Herschel Nistenson of the Association's back.
I'm Herschel Nistenson of the Associated Press, and I'm on my way to meet one of the most successful coaches in the game today. We'll be talking about some good independent teams from the East and a handful of players who could win national honors. Our destination, Boston College and Jack Bicknell. Jack, Boston College a year ago won the Lambert Trophy as the top team in the East. What can you do for an encore?
Well, we hope we can win it again. That's the whole key. Obviously, we want to do well in our own part of the country, and we have a chance to be a good football team. I don't know what that means because we've got to go out and play those games yet, but we have a chance to be a good team. It's going to be an interesting year.
Making life most interesting for Jack Bicknell will be the Pitt Panthers, ready to prowl again with 14 returning starters. The surest 4 yards in college football is any play run behind Bill Fraley, an imposing 6'7", 270-pound tackle who finished 8th in the Heisman balloting last year and could become the only interior lineman ever to win that coveted award. Last year, Penn State stumbled, the first defending national champion in 21 years to finish the following season not in the top 10. Coach Joe Paterno will look to sophomore tailback DJ Dozier to lead the comeback against a suicide schedule. The schedule includes Iowa, Texas, Maryland, Alabama, Notre Dame, and Pitt. In senior Paul Woodside, West Virginia may have the finest place kicker in all of college football. Syracuse will be strong and deep in running backs. While Navy is riding the crest of its own Heisman Trophy candidate, Napoleon McCallum enters 1984 with 16 Navy records and is the #1 returning rusher in college football, one of the best ever at the Naval Academy. In the Ivy League, Harvard and Penn will again be favorites, but the dark horse is former All-Pro Maxie Vaughn's rebuilding job at Cornell, a team that scored 104 points, winning their final 3 games of 1983. At Boston College, Doug Flutie is in a class all by himself. All-American quarterback, Heisman candidate, and on schedule this season to becoming college football's first 10,000-yard man in total offense. At only 5'9½", a lot of experts just don't see how he does it.
As far as I'm concerned, you don't have to be that tall, and you just go out and you play your game, and at 5'9½", you're not going to see over linemen, but at 6'1", 6 foot, you're not going to see over linemen either. I think it's been more of an asset than anything. It's really, it's helped me as far as quickness and being able to move around in the pocket and some agility. You know, some of the plays I've been able to make because maybe I've been a step quicker.
Jack, the last few seasons, people tend to mention Boston College in the same breath with quarterback Doug Flutie, who set all kinds of records here. Certainly, the Eagles' rise to football prominence has occurred since Flutie has been here and has been your quarterback. And without disparaging your coaching, could you have done it without Flutie?
No. To be honest with you, he's just been an amazing young man for us, and what he's done is given the rest of our team the feeling that you're never out of a game. And so now the rest of our players, we have other players, obviously, than just Doug, but the rest of our players feel like Doug's going to keep us in the ball game, and let's just play like heck, and who knows. And so he's been a very, very important part of our resurgence as a football program.
Jack, many, many years ago, in the days when country and western music was still known as cowboy songs, there's an old-time song called Cowboy Jack. And up around these parts in the Northeast and in New England, you are known as Cowboy Jack. And I dare say that not many football coaches have a box full of country tapes of Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard and Waylon Jennings that you've got sitting over there. When you come home at night, you don't go to the playbook and you don't put a film on the wall. What do you do?
Well, in all honesty, I don't, because I work at it all day, and when I get home, I like to relax. I do enjoy music, and I enjoy country and western music, and it's funny because I'm from New Jersey. I'm not a cowboy, you know, but I've been playing the guitar since I was a kid, just fooling around, and I really enjoy country and western music, and it relaxes me.
What a fool I was to think I could get by. I cried. Oh, I might have known the worst was yet to come, and the crying time for me had just begun. For today I started loving you again. I'm right back where I really always been. just long enough to let my heartaches in. And today I started loving you again.
Now for my predictions. I'll go with the University of Pittsburgh as the Beast of the East in 1984. The Panthers have one of the top offensive linemen in recent years in college football in Bill Fralick. The rest of the team is solid. Boston College should be right up there, led by quarterback Doug Flutie, a potent offense. Pitt and Boston College don't play each other, so we may never be able to prove this. Penn State, perhaps a year or so away. West Virginia lost Jeff Hostetler at quarterback. That could be a problem. Syracuse may also have a problem at quarterback. If they solve that, the Orange Men could be the surprise team in the East. Army, Navy, Rutgers, Temple, not this year.
For Offensive Player of the Year, Herschel Nissenson calls it a draw between Doug Flutie and Big Bill Fralick. Defensive Player of the Year, linebacker Chris Dolman of Pitt. In the Atlantic Coast Conference, Clemson's Mike Epley returns at quarterback as the Tigers will challenge for national honors. Anchoring the defense is 320-pound William Perry, so massive that he says about his early years, "When I was little, I was big." At North Carolina, where Coach Dick Crum favors the running game, Ethan Horton could become the 17th Tar Heel back ever to gain over 1,000 yards this season. No other school can match that accomplishment. Defending champion Maryland lost their quarterback, and the Terps face a rebuilding year. At North Carolina State, Joe McIntosh could be one of the least known but most productive runners in the conference.
In the Atlantic Coast Conference, Clemson should again be the class of the league. Dependable Mike Epley at quarterback handles the offense, and William Perry at nose guard, all 320 pounds of him, is a defense unto himself. North Carolina, a strong challenger with Ethan Horton at tailback. Maryland may have lost a few too many people, so this may be the year that Georgia Tech and North Carolina State move into contention.
In my opinion, Napoleon McCallum, Doug Flutie, and Ethan Horton are all excellent candidates for the Heisman Trophy. But if tackle Bill Fralick is as good as the experts say, why not vote him for the Heisman? Is there any reason a lineman should not win it? Coming up next, the toughest conference in college football. So far, the writers have selected Iowa to win the Big Ten, Nebraska to repeat in the Big 8, and Pitt as the class of the East. Still to come are predictions and opinions from coaches Terry Donahue of UCLA, Freddie Akers of Texas, and Pat Dye of Auburn. The coaches and writers have some interesting ideas on the national championship and 2 new and quite controversial rule changes. All this and more when we return in just a moment.
Tired of being alone? Tired of waiting for...
We're standing here in Jordan-Hare Stadium, the home of the Auburn Tigers, the defending Southeastern Conference champions. And I'm standing here now with Pat Dye, the head football coach. You played a tough schedule last year, played 8 teams that went to bowls, played 8 teams that were ranked in the top 20. What do you see for Auburn in 1984?
I think that we're going to be very young offensively in some areas. We only have one senior that would be starting on offense right now. We've got an unproven quarterback situation. Defensively, we should be a good football team, but we won't have the depth we had a year ago, in the defensive line particularly. But I think overall we probably have more talent than we had last year, and I think we've got the finest football player in America in Bo Jackson.
You're talking about Bo Jackson. He'll be a junior this year. He'll be a leading candidate for the Heisman. What does Bo Jackson mean to this team? Could you take a Bo Jackson and put him on maybe 3 or 4 other teams in the conference?
Probably
they would
so.
Be the favorite?
Probably so. I would think so. Of course, Bo has meant a great deal to Auburn in the 2 years that he's played here. I think that he's won a couple of games that I say a couple. He's probably won 4 or 5 that we wouldn't have won without him. He's been very instrumental in our 2 wins over Alabama the last couple of years. Of course, the great thing about Bo is that he seems to play better against a better team.
We're going to go out and give it just a little bit more effort than we did last year. And I think last year, if we had gave it just that little more effort, we would have probably been the national champions. But that's all behind us now. We can't dwell on last year's season. We got to look forward to this one in order to get to the top.
Along with Bo Jackson at Auburn, the SEC is blessed with superlative runners, but most teams are breaking in new quarterbacks. Senior Ricky Moore could become the first back ever to lead Alabama in rushing 4 straight seasons. A quarterback must be found, but 9 returning defensive starters will keep the Tide on a roll. The conference's leading rusher, Johnny Jones, returns at Tennessee, but a young offense will miss quarterback Alan Cockrell, who gave up his final year of eligibility to play professional baseball. LSU fans are still confident the Dalton-Hilliard-Gary James tandem will explode. And with quarterback Jeff Wickersham throwing to All-American Eric Martin, many teams will find it difficult to hold those Tigers. Florida returns 4 quality runners. With the defense anchored by nose guard Tim Newton, the Gators are a solid dark horse for their first SEC championship in school history. Look for Vanderbilt's Air Express, Kurt Page and Chuck Scott, to be one of the most dangerous passing combos in all of college football. The real unknown of the SEC is Georgia, where Vince Dooley's accomplishments over the past 4 years have been the best in college football, but where a fabulous class of seniors have played their final games between the hedges.
We'll be relatively young, but I think that our ball club will grow as we go along in the season. I think we'll have an opportunity to have some great games, but I really think that we may be going through some rough seas. We may have to batten down the hatches, so to speak. But again, it's all compared to the great 4-year record that we've had.
Who is the favorite to win the Southeastern Conference Championship? My prediction is Auburn. Why? Bo Jackson, several other outstanding starters, plus 21 good red shirts. 2, Alabama, 16 returning starters. Good first-team offense, good first-team defense. 3 is a team that I would not be afraid to pick as the champion. Florida, good offensive team. 4, Georgia. Tennessee, and I'm going to throw in LSU. New coach, 16 returning starters, outstanding quarterback. As far as the rest of the teams in the conference, I do not see a contender.
Bill Lumpkin's pick as the Offensive Player of the Year is Auburn's great running back, Bo Jackson. Defensive Player of the Year, 275-pound Florida nose guard Tim Newton.
Offense, execute.
Among the Southern Independents, this man adds a major mystery to the new season. His name is Jimmy Johnson. In 5 years at Oklahoma State, he won 29, lost 25.
Give it your all. Let's go.
Let's go. His challenge is to follow a miracle in Miami. This early summer change in the Hurricanes' leadership adds an unknown factor to the Deep South.
Among the Southern Independents, Miami is the big question mark. And the reason is that Howard Schnellenberger is no longer the head coach. They still have Bernie Kosar. They still have the good receivers. They may have some problems on defense. And they have a schedule that the Pittsburgh Steelers probably couldn't handle. Florida State has Greg Allen, one of the top running backs in the country, returning. At East Carolina, 26 seniors had to be replaced. At offensive tackle, East Carolina has 6 who are 6'5", 290 or better. Joe Morrison at South Carolina has that program on the road to recovery, just like he did at New Mexico, just like he did at Chattanooga. The Southern Independents will be tough.
In my opinion, a new coach bears watching in the South. Bill Arnsparger at LSU was known as a defensive genius among the pros. Bill has some exceptional talent returning from a team that just 2 years ago played in the Orange Bowl. LSU, a team that could finish 6th or 1st, in the balanced SEC. Coming up next, the shootout continues between Texas and SMU. But as Waco Tribune-Herald sports editor Dave Campbell points out, anyone can win the wide-open Southwest Conference Championship.
In the late 1950s and 60s and early 70s, Texas and Arkansas dominated the Southwest Conference. But in 1974 and for the last 10 years, no less than 7 different teams have won or shared the Southwest Conference Championship. Now that's an example of true football parity. And it looks as if 1984 will provide us an even better example of parity and balance and tight and tense competition in the Southwest Conference.
In an attempt to climb back up the conference ladder, Texas Tech will count on a strong defense to improve their 3 wins of a year ago. Baylor is in the unique position of returning a pair of quarterbacks ranked 1st and 2nd last season in Southwest Conference passing. Quarterback is also the key at Houston, where sophomore Gerald Landry not only established his ability to run the offense, but to overcome those dreaded turnovers that have plagued the Cougars over the years. There's been a history of Southwest Conference head coaches winning the title their 3rd year. This is Jackie Sherrill's 3rd season at Texas A&M. And with 6 of their first 7 games at home and most of the offense returning, the Aggies are the dark horse of the conference. Much of A&M's fate will depend on how well quarterback Kevin Murray recovers from a spring knee injury. Arkansas's new coach Kenny Hatfield will unveil an old conference favorite, the Wishbone. Hatfield has veteran quarterback Brad Taylor to attempt to unseat the league's Big 2, SMU and Texas.
We've seen 7 of the Southwest Conference teams in action. There are 9 teams in all, and so we'll now look at the other 2. We're here in Austin conferring with Coach Fred Akers. Coach, I think that there are 3 main questions concerning the Longhorns in the minds of most fans this year. First, how do you go about replacing that marvelous defense you had last year in view of all the losses you suffered? And second, how will Edwin Simmons come back this year after his knee surgery during the offseason? And third, how about the Texas quarterback situation this year?
Well, we did have a great defense, and there's no question about it. I think it's the best one we've seen in college football, in recent history anyway. And we lost quite a number of our better football players. Jerry Gray, who I feel is a definite All-America, the best safety in the country, in my opinion, returned, but he's the only defensive back we have that returned. Tony the Great is the only defensive lineman that we have returning, and I think Tony is capable of being an All-American. Edwin Simmons has really developed into a top-flight running back. The problem with Edwin is that he missed over half the season a year ago because of a knee condition, and this spring we operated on both his knees, not just one. So his rehabilitation is going to be very important and very crucial. I wish I could tell you that he was going to be ready to play. Lord knows I do. But our doctors at this point would say he's doubtful, but at least he has a chance. Now, our quarterback situation is, some people say something's wrong, you don't have a number 1 quarterback. We don't at this point. I can't see a whole lot wrong with it. We didn't have one last year, and we were 11-1. If we don't have an established number 1 quarterback, I'm not going to fret about it. We'll play them as we see fit and hope that they can win.
Blocking the path for a Longhorn repeat are some marvelous Mustangs from SMU, particularly runners Reggie Dupard, leading rusher in the Southwest last year as a sophomore, and Jeff Adkins, the most prolific freshman runner in Southwest Conference history. But the challenge at SMU is replacing Lance McElhenney, who won a conference record 34 games as starting quarterback.
Now that we've seen the teams in action, it's time for some predictions. I think that the top defensive player in the Southwest Conference this year is going to be Texas A&M's marvelous defensive tackle, Ray Childress, who is also a strong Lombardi Trophy candidate. I think that the leading offensive player will be SMU running back Reggie Dupard, who rushed for more than 1,000 yards last season as a sophomore. And as for the race for the team championship, I think we're in for a real dogfight, with Baylor and Texas A&M and Houston leading the way for a while, but for the race finally coming down to between SMU and Texas, and I think Texas will win out.
In my opinion, quarterbacks will be the key to who does win out in the Southwest Conference race. SMU must replace a great one. Texas, like last year, will alternate starters, while both Houston and the Texas Aggies return excellent sophomores to run their attacks. As the quarterbacks go, so may go the Southwest Conference race. Next, the Far West, where Jim Perry of the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner has a real surprise pick in the...
Out west, the Pac-10 is certainly on a hot streak in the Rose Bowl. In fact, this conference has defeated the Big Ten in the New Year's Day Classic in 13 of the last 15 games. However, in the 1980s, there's been a dramatic shift in the power structure of the conference, as USC, which dominated the league in the 60s and 70s, has been replaced at the top by Washington and UCLA. However, this year I'm going to pick a team to win the conference which has never won a Pac-10 title, a squad which has the league's best defense. My choice to dethrone UCLA, the Sun Devils of Arizona State.
It'll be tougher to score on Arizona State than to get tickets to a Michael Jackson concert. 10 starters return from the Pac-10's top defense. With 8 games at home, the Sun Devils have the defense and schedule to win their first trip to the Rose Bowl ever. For the past 2 years, Southern California has lacked its ultimate weapon, the 1,000-yard rusher. And last year, the Trojans suffered their poorest season in 22 years. Now the foundation is laid for SC to reestablish the importance of the tailback, as the Trojans will field a pro-sized offensive line averaging 6 foot 6 inches tall, weighing 265 pounds. Washington must replace 2-year quarterback Steve Pallure, last year's Pac-10 Offensive Player of the Year. The Cougars of Washington State won their last 5 games of 1983, and that momentum plus fullback Kerry Porter should get them off to a roaring start in 1984. Emphasis on the past will continue to shape Stanford's future, with new coach Jack Elway relying heavily on sophomore quarterback John Pay. Defending Pac-10 champion UCLA will also put the ball up a lot, all part of a wide-open offensive philosophy adopted by Coach Terry Donahue several years ago.
First of all, even though we were successful with a run-oriented offense, we were failing in 2 areas. One was that there was a constant criticism of our teams that we weren't entertaining. We were not exciting enough. And in Los Angeles, with the demand for the entertainment dollar, with all of the different sports that we have here in this city, you not only have to win, you have to entertain. And that became very apparent to me as I grew as a head coach. That was one area that I don't think we were being successful. And then the other was we weren't being successful in the final game of the season, which was against our arch rival USC.
Terry, as you go for a 3rd straight Rose Bowl in 1984, what are your team's strengths and weaknesses?
Well, Jim, I think this year's football team needs a little more rebuilding than the last 2 seasons that we've had. But I do think there are some very apparent strengths on the 84 squad. First of all, on the offensive side of things, the 3 top wide receivers on the team all return. Carl Durrell, Mike Sherrard, and Mike Young, and I think all 3 are very gifted players. And that'll give us the ability to continue throwing the football. Defensively, I think that our strength probably lies in the fact that we have a good nucleus of players back. Our defensive line is what I would label as a solid group of athletes that play hard, that have a lot of enthusiasm, that have excellent work ethic, and are going to produce a good tempo and intensity on our football team.
In looking over the Pac-10, UCLA, with a nice blend of youth and experience, will once again be a strong contender for the Rose Bowl. Washington has not finished lower than 2nd in the last 7 years in the Pac-10, and the Huskies get a great advantage this year. They don't have to play either UCLA or Arizona State. The team with the most starters coming back of anyone in the conference is USC, which returned 17 of those. And then there's Washington State, last year's surprise team, which won its last 5 games and has 14 starters returning this year. But in looking over the conference, the team that I picked to win it all this year, their first Pac-10 title ever, is Arizona State. My pick for Offensive Player of the Year, Washington State running back Kerry Porter. The conference's only 1,000-yard rusher last year is just a sophomore. The Defensive Player of the Year, Jack Del Rio from USC, who's also a strong candidate for the Lombardi Award. In the WAC conference, Air Force and Wyoming will be very strong contenders this year, but the team I picked to win it all for the 9th straight year is BYU, coached by the brilliant passing genius Lavelle Edwards. The Cougars have some rebuilding to do, but they've got enough skills to win it again.
Those teams of the far west, as well as everyone else in college football, will have to deal with a pair of rule changes in 1984 that are quite controversial. So coming up, the coaches comment on those new rules and the writers try to select a national champion. There are two very visible rule changes that go into effect this season, and they're somewhat controversial, so pay attention now. One of them is a change in the old pass interference penalty. You recall for many years a team whose receiver was interfered with was awarded the ball and a first down at the site and the point of that infraction. But now under the new rule, the ball will be returned to the line of scrimmage and a 15-yard penalty will be stepped off. The coaches differ on their opinions of this one.
The pass interference rule, where it's now 15 yards for pass interference rather than the spot of the interference, I think is a good rule because you saw so many really cheap long gains. You know, late in the game, you might just throw the ball down the field 50 yards, and if somebody bumped somebody, it was a 50-yard penalty plus a first down. So I think the 15-yard penalty is a good rule.
By and large, that pass interference penalty at the spot of the foul on some of these desperation passes is just not right. I don't think that's any way to win a game. And so from that standpoint, I like the rule.
I say I have mixed emotions about it because I think it's going to create some incredible situations, again, strategy-wise and teaching-wise, as to whether or not you just go ahead and tackle the receiver. Again, I hate to see us do anything that would take away a very exciting part of the game, which is what has become known as the 2-minute offense, where the Hail Mary type play that would win the ball game. I think this will eliminate that, and I hate to see that. I don't know, but I personally think that's going to be a short-lived rule.
Obviously, we haven't heard the last of that rule. Now, the second one involves a kickoff in which the ball is kicked out of the end zone. Last year, the ball was given to the receiving team at the 20-yard line. But this year, it will be placed on the 30-yard line. Most coaches agree with the opinion of Pat Dye of Auburn.
The kickoff into the end zone, I don't know why we did what we did there. Of course, it's a penalty if you kick a ball out of the end zone. I would have much preferred we'd gone to the same rule that the NFL has and moving the ball back 5 yards and let them kick it as far as they want to. I think that the other rule seems to be penalizing people for having good kickers. And I don't know, I just, sometimes we make up rules just to be making up rules, and I think the case of the kicking thing was, I think it was not a good rule.
Well, there's some dissent about the new rule changes. There's something that coaches and the writers have agreed upon, that the preseason Heisman Award favorite is Bo Jackson, Auburn's great running back, with Doug Flutie of Boston College a close second. On the subject of which team will replace Miami as the national champion, there is a wide range of opinion.
The last 4 national champions, Georgia, Clemson, Penn State, and Miami, were all first-time national champions, and I'll pick the Sun Devils of Arizona State to make it 5 in a row.
National champion, Auburn.
I'll take a flyer on Texas. Fred Akers' club came close last year, and this year I think might make it.
For the national championship, Notre Dame.
In a way-out, wild year, I'll say Alabama, a team that's got a tremendous number of good running backs, a good offensive line, and a maturing defense.
With preseason rankings carrying the clout they do, I think the national champion will be Auburn or Texas.
With several teams in the running, Auburn rates the most votes. That's the opinion of the writers, and I'm sure you have your own. We'd like to thank the coaches and the writers for their insights and predictions. I'm Tom Brookshier. Let's enjoy the excitement and emotion of college football's 115th season.